What's up, everybody? It's AJ here with Trax, and I'm bringing you a walk around of this brand new 2023 Polaris Sportsman XP 1000S. This is the biggest, baddest, most aggressive Sportsman that Polaris has ever built. And while it's not new for 2023, we decided that we wanted to get back on one, give it another test, and see what's changed, see what's still great, and if there is anything that's gone backwards. So this vehicle is, well, I mean, it's pretty much the best ATV ever produced. And don't get yourself all up in a knot. Your 1989 Honda is still a great ATV. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just this one's a whole lot better. I know you may not want to spend $20,000 on this. You may argue that the industry's gotten too expensive. It's too much money to go out and have fun. And you probably buy that $49 item off Amazon that says that it creates perpetual motion and your diesel vehicle will now go 4,000 kilometers further on a tank of fuel. That's okay. We still like you, but this ATV is still better than your Honda. I'm sorry. What's great about it? This is the biggest ATV ever produced. It's 55 inches wide. I mean, 55 inches, that's huge. Polaris made a Razor XC that was 55 inches wide, and we all thought it was amazing with two people side by side. This is one up. This vehicle is the most stable, the most confidence-inspiring, the fastest, and the most aggressive ATV ever produced. I mean, argue with it. Tell me you like your XXC Can-Am, your brute force, your whatever. You're wrong. This one's better. Now, I will say with a caveat, all of the areas of sportiness are stepped up a level if you buy the Scrambler. But the Scrambler is exactly the same except for suspension and bodywork. Everything else is the same. The motor's the same, the steering package is the same, suspension is the same. You just get a better quality shock. So I understand suspension isn't exactly the same, but the travel and the way that it's laid out is the same. So that's the only thing I'm going to say right up front. Yes, the Scrambler is a little bit better, but besides that, this, if you want something that has racks on it that you can still tow a lot with, you know, that still has a clamshell rack. One of the things I appreciate is that Polaris went full sport, full crazy on this thing, and they didn't get rid of the rack. So you open it up, and yes, you can say that, really, what do you do with this space? And my answer is not a whole lot, because you could fit maybe like a frozen bag of peas on this side and maybe a frozen bag of carrots over there, but you need something that's pliable and can squish to get in there. Yeah, it's not the most usable rack space under there, but you could maybe fit a toe strap or two and an extra pair of gloves. Bottle of water, why not? At least it's something. It's better than nothing. Now, because this is a Sportsman, they didn't go away from functionality. It still has all the hallmarks of a Sportsman. It'll pull, it'll haul stuff on the racks. Up front, you can put 200 pounds on this rack. Out back, you can put 300 pounds. You get 500 total pounds of capacity on the racks. That's pretty good. It's got all these built-in aluminum tie-down points. They're super handy. They also have lock and ride mounts on the top, as well as through the middle of the rack, and out back there's a whole bunch of lock and ride points. So depending on what you want to do with your Sportsman, you can do it. Depending on what accessories you have currently for a Sportsman, you can put them on here. There's lots of variations, lots of usability, lots of flexibility with this. And that's the key. The hallmark of this vehicle is that it's extremely capable at everything that it does. There's really nothing that it can't do. You may say 55 inches wide is too wide for your trails. Sure, there's going to be some trails that this won't fit on because it's arguably, you know, significantly wider than the average ATV. Take that with a grain of salt and realize that you will get zero of the stability, performance, and awesomeness of this vehicle with a standard ATV. The extra width of this makes it gooder. I know. You know what? Go on the Urban Dictionary. It's in there. Comes with the ultimate front bumper and rear bumper. It is pretty primo right up front. LED, LED, LED. Everything's LED. Everything's great. It's really, really bright. The halos on the front, or whatever you want to call it, signatures, they're pretty awesome looking. It's a great headlight. When you go to the full, you know, high and low beams, you get all kinds of goodness there. There's even a nice, you know, built-in halo strip on the top of the upper pod light as well. Pretty awesome. So why do I think that this vehicle is so capable and so awesome? Well, it's a little bit dirty because I spent the day riding it and was beating on it, and I found out that it is capable and awesome. It did everything I asked of it, And it's just so good because there's so much travel. There's 14 inches out back, almost 12 inches up front. I believe it's 11.6. And then the ground clearance is 14.5 inches. It means that you can rail down the trail. You can go over stuff that everybody else has to either squeeze real hard and hope that they don't break the bottom off the case of the engine. You just cruise right over top of. Doesn't matter. There is no issues. There's nothing that you're going to come in contact with that you would on any other ATV, bar maybe a jacked up mud runner, but those ATVs absolutely suck at high speed and they're no fun to drive. So it's got great ground clearance, it's got great travel, and it's really usable. I will say one thing negative about this, and you know what? I'm always pointing out the negatives on ATVs and side-by-sides. I'm trying to tell you exactly the goods and the bads. It's not so much bad, it's just that the first version of this ATV came with a really nice set of Walker Evans piggyback shocks. They were really high quality, they were adjustable, and they worked really well. They worked better than the steel body shocks that are on this ATV, and in my opinion, at the price point, I would like to see that. It's the best Sportsman ever produced, the highest quality, most expensive, it's everything. It really should have, at minimum, an aluminum body, take apart rebuildable shock, but I would like to see those Walker Evans come back because it was a big benefit. Now, maybe Polaris looked at it and said, hey, the step up to a scrambler, really, there's nothing between the old Sportsman, the original XP 1000S, and the Scrambler XP 1000S, so we need to make some differentiation here, and maybe that's why they took the shocks away from this one and went to a piggyback, or kept the piggyback on the Scrambler. I get that if that's the case, but I think people who are buying this want that same performance that the Scrambler's giving. They just want the usability of a rack, and so I would like to see those shocks come back. That's my only complaint. I don't really have anything else. It's got a 2-inch hitch receiver in the back. It'll pull 1,750 pounds. Like I said, there's all kinds of rack space everywhere around here. You know, there's a decent sized trunk in the back. This is actually a usable trunk back here. I could definitely fit a jacket, you know, maybe I could take some stuff for overnight if I needed to, some bottles of water, my lunch, whatever you might need back here. Fits in really nice, works really well. And again, lots of accessory points, lots of lock and ride points, lots of usability, and these big, strong aluminum tie downs. Really nice. When you're out on the trail, it has the performance standard and work mode features that give it a, you know, the drive-by-wire throttle input. It changes the kind of curve of the inputs. I don't really play with it too much. I tend to generally just leave it in performance mode because this engine is so snotty and aggressive at 89 horsepower, and I love the feel of it. I love the snappiness. I love the throttle response. When you put it in standard or work mode, it just makes it seem a little more numb, and that's good for some people. But truth be told, you're probably not going to be handing this thing off to your teenage child or some employee at work. This is an ATV that is not probably going to be around the job site. It's probably not going to be used by someone who's young. It shouldn't be used by someone who's young. This is for people who know what they're doing. I leave it in performance mode. I like it there. It's great. One of the things that I really appreciate about the steering of this vehicle is that Polaris went to the, I think they call it the ProStar front end, and it's exclusive to the XP 1000S models, that be the Scrambler and this Sportsman. And what it does is it essentially gets rid of bump steer on the front end. So bump steer is when you're going through the suspension travel and you hit bumps and it really yanks the front end around. You can go through just about anything with this, pitch sideways, steering through a corner. It can be absorbing the impacts and going through the travel, and the tires aren't following and going all over the place, and you're not having to seesaw at the handlebars. It works really good, and you can tell when you're doing like, I probably shouldn't say how fast I was going when we were sliding this thing, but you're going real fast. Like I'm talking, you look down at the gauge for a quick second and you go, oh my goodness, I'm going probably 15 to 20 miles an hour faster than I expected that I was. And on this ATV, you can do that if you're capable. It will do everything you want it to. It will continue to just push harder and faster and slide more and be in complete control while you're sliding it. Now, I know, people aren't going to just buy this thing to go out and go drift corners on flat, open, closed courses. But if you want to do it, it's really fun. Out on the trail, it works great still. The suspension is really compliant, whether you're on, the path going back to the hunt stand, or you're running the average trails with all your buddies who are running more narrow, you know, skinnied up ATVs, you're not gonna run into a problem where you're like, oh, this thing is just too sporty or it's too stiff. It's not at all. Very comfortable, very compliant. The seat is incredibly comfortable. And that's one of the things that we get told from everybody who sits on it. They go, wow, that seat is so comfortable. It feels really, really good. And it does. This is like all day comfort ATV. Handlebars in the right place. They feel really good. The brakes, I like Polaris, you know, single lever brakes. Yes, you can still use the foot pedal for the rears on the right side if you want, but single lever brakes on Polaris are really nice. Now, Polaris also has the Multiselect EPS. So the power steering has 3 modes. The only thing I don't necessarily love about it is the fact that to get to those modes, you have to go in to the settings screen, and it's not just super easy. You got to hold down the mode button, you got to go into the actual internal settings, and then you get to adjust the EPS from there. I kind of think it'd be nice if there was another rocker switch like the drive-by-wire system that just gave you a high, medium, and low. That would be a lot simpler. It would be something that would be easier to understand by most people and would work well. Drive modes on this, you have your all-wheel drive, and then you obviously have the active descent control, and you have your single just 2x4, which, you know, Polaris is pretty well known for having their incredible 4-wheel drive system that you don't need a locking front diff. It locks up as you need it. Found it to work awesome, no issues at all. 4-wheel drive performance is great. You're gonna notice in 4-wheel drive that you want a little more input from that EPS, so you're gonna wanna jack that up a little bit. I found low on the Multiselect EPS was the best at high speeds. I found medium was a little bit twitchy at high speeds. It just gave me a bit too much output for the input I was putting in, and I don't really like that feeling. It's a little, I don't know, it's a little nervous up front because there's just, you almost don't even have to touch the handlebars to get it to move. I like to be able to feel some of that road in the hands. And then high, I didn't even use because I don't need it. It's just too much output. Maybe in 4-wheel drive, you know, super, super deep, heavy, gnarly, muddy conditions in low range, you might want to use that, you know, when you're really having to pull on the bars. But then again, in that case, you can also wreck stuff. So I found medium and low to be the 2 settings that I use the most. You know, I guess I had slightly forgot about the fact that there is something else to talk about, which is fuel economy. Let's be real. This is a 1000cc, 89 horsepower ATV with massive travel. It weighs quite a bit. It's like 40% stiffer than an average Sportsman, the chassis. It's big, it's burly. It uses a bit more fuel. It is quite thirsty, we found. I'm not exactly sure how big the tank is. I can check that out and put a spec on screen, but it does drink the gas, so that's something to be known. I find all 1000s drink the fuel pretty good, and this one especially, just because the reality is, I don't think I was like less than 3/4 throttle, hardly at all, because it's just so much fun to play with. Like honestly, you can drift it. It's so good. It's so good. And I know I'm gonna get a bunch of people saying, oh, you just love Polaris, you just love Polaris. Shut up, I don't just love Polaris. I think Can-Am makes great ATVs and side-by-sides. I think Kawasaki makes great ATVs and side-by-sides. I think all kinds of people make great ATVs and side-by-sides. I just think this is the best ATV that's produced besides the Scrambler. And you know what? I'm right. Tire-wise, one of the things I found really interesting, Polaris stuck to 27-inch tires. Now this is the Duro 27-inch Power Grip V2. It's traditional, it's not a square setup, so we got 9 inches up front, we got 11s out back. It is a 14-inch rim. I like the rim, it's okay. Nothing, you know, mind-blowing about it, but it's a nice rim, it's good, looks good. Stopping power in behind with the brakes, works great, everything stops good. You will find that you think the brakes aren't working as good. It's actually just that you're going way faster. But I like the traditional tire setup on this. I was shocked that they just kept it to 27 because it's such a big buggy. And there's actually some ATVs that are coming with 27s now from the factory. So could this take a way bigger tire? 1000% yes. Like you could probably slap a 30 on this thing and it would be totally okay. Obviously you're gonna need a clutch kit, but from the factory, they probably could have put a 30 on. The problem with that is that right now, the center of gravity on this rig, the CG, is about as high as I think you want to be, and I think Polaris knew that. They knew that 55 inches wide with 14.5 inches of ground clearance, 14 inches of travel out back, and almost 12 up front was the 55-inch width is the sweet spot, and if they go any taller, which obviously adding more tire height adds overall ride height, adds overall CG, and I think that that's probably where this thing would start to feel a bit tippy and not as sporty. So the 27s, in my opinion, when you stand a ways back from it, everybody kind of says, oh, the tires look a little small. And they do, but they're still a 27. It's still a good sized tire, but I believe that there's purpose for this. And when you get out on the trail, you will not notice a single moment of anything negative from a 27-inch tire. They're fabulous. They work great. It's actually a really good tire. The Duro is not bad. The Power Grip V2, I'm surprised with. It gave great traction. If we're being honest and you look at the face of it, it looks exactly like a Bighorn 2.0. I mean, it looks almost like a dead ripoff. So very similar. I just have noticed that it's not chunking like a Bighorn does. I was pretty aggressive on these tires. There may have been some burnouts. There was a lot of high-speed sliding on aggressive, shaly, edgy rock. No chunks came out of the tires. So a good tire package from the factory. Another thing to notice, it does have a 3,500-pound Polaris HD winch from the factory. Comes with synthetic rope. It's nice. It's a Sportsman. It's the best you can buy. You don't need to send somebody to a dealership to buy the most expensive ATV built and say, oh, by the way, you have to buy a winch as well. It's not just a high-speed play toy. It is that, but it's not just that. I can hands down say this is the best ATV I've ever driven. Besides the Scrambler, I do like the Scrambler because it comes with those better shocks. But when it comes to a sport ute ATV, will work and play, this is the best one I've ever driven. If you're thinking about one, there's times where I really harp on stuff and I beat things up and I say they're just not where they should be. I can't tell you that with this. If you've been thinking about an XP 1000S or a Scrambler XP 1000S, yeah, I know they're pricey, they're not cheap, but neither are supercars, and this thing is in the category of super ATV. It is the best ever built. You can take my word for it, and you can take that word to the bank because it's good. Go to your dealership, talk to your dealer, tell them that Dirt Trax sent you. You're not going to regret it. It sounds pretty good too, and out back, the single center stack exhaust is pretty sweet. That might sound really good with an aftermarket exhaust too. MBRP? Maybe.